got an episode that's in the works and live now. This is our fifth one, right? So we're kind of getting ready for a lot of these. And I know you've got a couple questions, and I had a couple questions for you.
You had some too. Great. Did you remember to write down who asked them? Because I forgot that part. I know it was a fairly important part, and I know that we should.
I did write down because I'm the one that asked them. So
good.
I just wrote down a couple questions that I thought might, in case we ran short on material, which we hardly ever do. I thought I'd have a couple questions queued up for you, put you right on the spot like I like to do.
Okay, well, that sounds like fun. Thanks for mentioning any of this before we actually turned on record. But, hey, we're here now, and that's absolutely fine. Overall, how was your week?
It's been a busy. Well, I said it's been a busy week. I went on a 3-day vacation with my wife.
Sounds tough.
We've been in the middle of a remodel in our house, and it's been about a year, and it's still kind of ongoing, and we just needed to get the hell out of here. So we took a ride 2 or 3 hours and went down to the Florida Keys for 3 days and got back yesterday, and I'm back in the saddle. Yeah.
Sounds good.
And this is a big week for us. This is our Thanksgiving week that we celebrate every year, and big week for us here. So
fantastic. That's very good. Yeah. My week was absolute chaos. We had 2 big jobs on, 2 24-hour running 24 hours. So one started Sunday last week, Sunday in the morning. About 50 pieces of equipment, whatever it is, trucks, machines, whatever, and then ran into non-stop until Wednesday. And then from Thursday, we then started to fill a stadium for the Supercross, which ends up being, I think we take about 7,500 tonne into a stadium in rigids only with no trailers, because of weight limits on the road, and it's right in the centre of town. And then we have to take out 7,500 tonne immediately afterwards. So we end up moving a fair bit of material.
Now, did I see that you posted on Instagram? Is that built up on top of a platform?
Yeah. So the
fill is actually on top of a platform.
Well, the platform is just to protect the grass, but the grass dies with no sunlight, so they roll it out and then they roll it back while we put 650 or 700 truckloads of dirt on it. We ended up getting the 700 truckloads out in 20 hours.
There you go.
So that's from like, you got to be able to ramp up at the beginning to ramp down at the end. That's all inclusive in the 20 hours. It obviously, because why wouldn't it? It obviously rained.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it rain? Of course it's got to rain. So
you just need a big umbrella.
I think it rained about an inch. Not too much of a problem where we were picking up the dirt. Fairly decent problem for where I stack it. I own the land where we stack it. And so that was good fun. With the council were upset about the state of the road, even though we had street sweepers and all sorts of shit cleaning the road. And they were still unhappy, even though rumble grids but when you get an inch of rain and a truckload every 30 seconds for 15 hours or something, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter what you've got in place, the road's going to get a little bit muddy.
So this was basically you just rented dirt to the stadium for
I rent dirt. Yep,
a few days.
That's exactly. Yeah, I rent dirt with transport. So you put those two things together, and most people don't have the ability to rent dirt. First off, and then if you do, very few people have the ability to transport 700 loads in or 600 whatever loads in 20 hours.
Yeah.
But with loading it, stacking it, cleaning all of the rubbish that's attached to it. But at a minimum, it's really hard to move that many loads into the middle of the city. Like it is, gridlock, in peak hour and afternoons, and like that's all included. We lump Summit as well, so we're not doing it on rates. We take care of the whole lot because you don't make money on rates. You make money on lump summing projects and risk.
If you can get it done,
if you can get it done, that's where you make money. If you don't get it done, that's where you lose money.
But it's a really intriguing project to just move in 7,500 tons, something like that, and for a few days, and then pick it up and move it back up.
The real tons, the 2,200 pound tons, none of this 2,000 pound tons either.
None of the imperial stuff that we do.
No. They got to be the real ones because you're cutting me 10% short then.
You're right.
So
that was an issue for us about 15 years ago, or 20 years ago maybe. Our Department of Transportation insisted that we bid everything according to metric. So we switched over to meters payment for pipe and curbing, and cubic meters payment for dirt, gravel, that sort of stuff, metric tons for asphalt. And it took the industry a while to learn that we had to, in effect, price our materials at least by the cubic yard up, another 10%.
I constantly, when talking to my American friends, do the conversions in my head for them. Because they just, it's just a foreign concept. You talk a cubic metre to some people and they go, I don't know if that's a lot or a little.
Yeah.
I know a cubic foot isn't much, but a cubic yard's a little bit.
Right.
I just do most of the conversions, but it's challenging some of the, the inch and an eighths and all of that sort of shit that we just don't deal with here.
So you had a question that you brought.
I did, and I apologise to the guy who sent it to me on Instagram. I wrote back to you a couple of times, but it was during the weekend when we were wading through a river of shit with 20 mil of rain pumping down as we're trying to move all of the dirt into a wet yard and not get bogged. And it was a question about scale.
Okay.
And I think that part of the challenge around scale is that obviously everyone wants it, but there is no actual pathway to do it. There's a few fundamental things you've got to do in business, but it's not like you can say ABC equals 1, 2, 3. If you do this, then you'll end up with a company with 10 people. If you do this at a company of 10 people, you're going to end up with one at 100. Yeah. And I know that you've gone through various different ways to scale. You've built your own business. You've built other businesses. You've, moved into different states. They're all different ways of scaling. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on it, because it would be one of the hardest things in business to do.
It is hard because scaling in a software business is it doesn't take a lot more overhead. It doesn't take you just create more software. But scaling in a construction business to me is much harder. And if you scale wrong, it gets harder to reclaim your lost ground. And I think we talked a little bit about this, that if everybody is not disciplined and held to the same standards, held accountable to what it is, the principles that you want to come into play as you do the work, then the more people you add, the more, let's say, slop you have in your organization. In other words, a decision that you would have made would have been X, and now the decision this person makes might be Y, or X times 0.5 or X times. So, right? Yeah. So it's so hard to understand. So that's why we talked a little bit ago about making sure they understand what success looks like. I think it was on a couple podcasts ago. And if you can be clear
And
about that.
and so with that is part of the difficulty with scaling, because it's very, depending on the market, of course, it can be incredibly easy to find work.
Oh yeah.
Like, there are guys screaming for you to do the job. Is the difficulty keeping that company? Is the difficulty in making a success of the scale rather than actually scaling? Maybe.
Yeah. So scaling is. I mean, the truth is anyone can scale, and the other truth is a lot of people scale and go out of business as a result. So what's the difference? I think, and I think scaling requires a fair amount of capital. You can outrun your money in a hurry when you try to scale a business like this, but you can also outrun your capacity in a hurry. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. And I think what you're talking about is when you scale a construction business, someone has to do the job that you were just doing, right? If I was the foreman, if I'm just a one-man crew or one crew company, and I'm the foreman on that crew and I want to scale, that means somebody has to step into the job I'm doing and hopefully do it as good as I'm doing, probably better. But now I've got to move up and I've got to find work. I've got to find other people to do that. And the only way I think you can do that is number one, know your people. And number two, make sure that you don't give up on that accountability. That's the thing I will go to my grave talking about, is that accountability piece. It's always got to be there, because if you try to scale without accountability, you're going to have a lot of messes.
I know that I've ran into I have nowhere near all the answers that I need to run a successful construction company. I firmly believe that I've been lucky with the people that are here. I've been lucky with the people who have helped me be able to be, to make Starbuck what it is, because it stops being, about Herb, and it stops being about Jimmy,
Right.
and starts being about Sargent.
Yeah.
People don't see me as Jimmy Starbuck. I'm just Jimmy, and I work at Starbuck. And I'm
Right.
sure that that's what ended up happening. People
Sure.
often actually ask me, what's your last name? And I say, Starbuck. And they go, what, really? Your name's really Jimmy Starbuck? And I go, yeah. But I think that part of that, the huge challenge, and I've gone through it multiple times, is that as you're sliding in on the people underneath, and especially when you win a big job that doubles your resource requirement, let's say, and then you go, right, God, I've got it. And so the great guys are spread thin. The inducted guys who know what it's about are spread thin. And then I've also ran into the problem a lot of times where, let's say you have that really great leading hand or a lead operator, that then you move into that foreman position. They might not be great at being a foreman.
Right.
And are they not great at being a foreman because of the training, or are they not great at being which we provide, or are they not great at being a foreman because of the fact that they don't want to be? I've had people that have came to me and said, Jimmy, you gave me that operations manager's position. I was really just happy being what I was being. I'm not that guy, or I'm not that girl. And I think that that's okay too. And I think that to be, not pig-headed, which I know that I've had so many instances myself where I just keep bashing my head against the wall, is to actually look at it and think, well, if you're not right, you mentioned in the very first podcast, I think, seats on the bus.
Yeah.
Which seat are you in? Are you good in that seat? Are you happy in that seat? Where, we're a company who if you're here, if you're on the bus, you're on the bus with us, where we can always put you in another seat. But if you're not good there, then we can move you left or right. And I think that all of those lessons as you learn end up being the lessons around scaling.
So one of the most important things, we talk about the bus, and I love that analogy, and we've used it. I read about it in one of the Jim Collins books, Good to Great, I think, is you need to have the right people on the bus. But the other thing is they have to want to go where the bus is going. And if you don't know where the bus is going as the owner, if you don't know where the bus is going, it's hard to hold people accountable to sitting in the right direction on a bus that's going in a direction nobody knows. So when we talk about scaling, I think there's so many things that come into it. It's okay, let's scale, but why? And I've talked to so many companies, owners that have been in business 10 to 15 years now, and they just are like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I got on this rocket ship. I think we talked about this before. I got on this, what I thought was a horse, and now it's a rocket ship, and I'm screeching, and I have no idea what I'm doing because it grew faster than I did. And then it's just kind of like, okay, well, let's change the angle of attack a little bit. Let's level this thing off. But there's so many things that come to it. You know, I mentioned, the capital required to run a business, and all it takes. We've talked about this a couple of times. Is one or two people not paying you on time, and then you've got a big wrinkle in your cash flow, and hopefully that doesn't pry all the way down into your payroll.
No one likes getting wrinkles.
Yeah, and I've got them here, but it's the relationships with your bank and your bonding company. Are they with you on this ride too? So they've got to be on the bus with you. There's so many aspects to it that I think what's happened in the last 10 years is the workload, at least in the U.S., and I know you said in your area for some period, has just been so insane that work has just been dropped on us, and we take it, and we just, it ends up not being good for us because we don't know what the hell to do with it.
Well, you get so used to saying yes. You like it. It gets ingrained in your psyche as a company to say yes. Even to the point where people say the customer's always right. Well, at some point in business, you learn that that's actually incorrect. Maybe the customers overall need to be more right than they are wrong, because otherwise you're going to lose all of your customers. But you also have a responsibility as the supplier to that customer to try and lead them in a way that provides for the outcome that they're actually after. It's no good doing something wrong. It's no good pouring concrete in the wrong spot just because the customer said so.
And the other thing I think we need always, we tend to discount, I think, is what a good customer is. Mm. I know I have in the past, and we work for, government agencies that are not really good customers, but we work for them every year. They're tough to deal with, but there's also, general contractors or private companies that I think if we really took and went down through our project list or our work and process schedule and rated these customers on a 1 to 10 basis, there's probably some would say, you know what, I don't think I'll go to them again.
Have you been to customer before? Have you ever said that you don't work with one anymore?
Yeah, yes.
I've done it, and I've done it to one of my majors.
Yeah.
And it really hurt. But I think that we're stronger for it. The rates were always incredibly low. We'll call it competitive. The rates that they wanted were competitive.
Yep.
Their finance team was always challenging. Payments were good yet sporadic. I'm being tactful here.
In case
however, yeah, but that's okay. But however, the main part about it is that their requirements were really high. So if we have 150 trucks out and they call up in the afternoon and say, "Hi, can we have 100 trucks tomorrow?" and you've got 80 on the board already, the people are missing out. Like if we've only got the capacity to send 100, whatever it is, then you're letting them down. But then they're so big and such a behemoth inside your business as well that it ends up being an actual constraint. It ends up being almost a little bit of a noose around your neck that without them, you're not, say we've got the capacity to get to 140, but we've only got orders for 80 without them. And then if you do take the job, you don't have the headroom to increase that number of 80, where you don't have, you can't support the customers who are building up. And let's say they go from needing 20 trucks to 40 trucks. You have to say, oh, nah, sorry, I'm supplying old mate who decides when and where he pays me, when he orders. I ask him every day what he needs, and he says he doesn't know until the afternoon. But like them putting in probably, let's say it'd be the top 5 orders in the state worth of trucks at 4 p.m. Like it explodes the business from the inside out. Like it literally destroys the business to try and do that. And so we ended up moving away. Yeah.
So, and you said you think maybe you're stronger because of it. And I think maybe you are, because every time you say, you said it, it's almost like we're addicted to saying yes. We don't know another answer. But the truth is, every time we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. Because we just only have a certain amount of bandwidth, right? And then, our bandwidth may be, let's say, a meter wide. But then if all of a sudden we get sucked down into tactical mode, we don't talk about band depth. We only talk about bandwidth. And when we suck down into tactical mode, that bandwidth has to shrink, right? So that's why, to me, it's so important, if you talk about scaling, understand your customers, understand what they need, understand their limitations. Say yes to the ones that are the best, and it's kind of the same with employees, but that's I guess the way I try to look at scale.
And it's so challenging to know if it's right as well. If you're doing it right, you have to do it wrong. Like I say that I think that I'm right at the moment. I'll let you know in 6 to 12 months if we pick back up to 150 trucks every single day, because we're trying to find new customers to plug that gap in a more sustainable way. However, we could have kept on that gravy train as well, and maybe taken a few hits across along the way, and it might have been the better option. I'm still uncertain, but I do know that one thing, in intentionality, making decisions with the information that you have and actually making a decision is just as important as the direction of that decision. You must, draw a line in the sand. You must, make a decision, stick with it, and then see it through. I find that a lot of people, if they change direction too much through the journey of trying to scale, that's when a lot of trouble happens as well.
Well, the important thing is not to burn bridges when you. If you do change directions, I think the important thing is to just have that conversation with that customer. I mean, over a coffee or a pint, and say, hey, look, here's the reasons why we have to change this direction. If you ever need any trucks,
give me a call. That's what I went and had that conversation. I said, listen, I can't be your first call, but I'm the only number that you need. If you're stuck, you call me. I will bend my fleet backwards to support you in anything. And that's not just one day. If you need support for a month, then it's support for a month. But overall, we're going to try and lean into some of our other customers and their work, rather than this really bulk heaps of trucks, great trucks. We're still working for, and still working for them, actually, just maybe not with every truck in our fleet. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, you talk about scale and different things that come into play. What have been your biggest lessons as you've scaled?
People are scared to talk about it, but get lots of money.
Yeah.
If you're scaling, you need to watch that money like a hawk. What you have, you need to spend it wisely, and then last but not least, do not forget about your tax, because without your tax being, you can scale all you like, but then let's say you go from $1 million turnover to $10 million turnover in a year, and if you get a $2 million tax bill, and you spend all of your money on, your cash flow, you spend all of your money on wages and everything, you're going to be in deep shit.
Yeah, and that's, I talk about it in terms that I have with you on the podcast here in terms of altitude, right?
Yeah.
Is our job is to get our plane, our company to an altitude that if the cash got turned off on us, we've still got some altitude so we can glide for a while until we can figure that out. And
Yep.
I think that's really an important, probably the most important thing is the cash, is understanding how cash flow works and not to get what I call yellow fever. I think that's one of the problems in this industry is we get a little cash in our hands and we want to go buy a fleet of
Every piece of yellow
excavators.
of equipment that exists, we'll just
Yeah.
buy one of each model.
Yeah, and I think a lot more conservatism is required in the equipment acquisition world than I practiced, and I think
Yeah,
that
and
most
me.
people practiced.
And me, yeah, because it just it makes sense, and it does make sense at some point if you're only looking at it from that angle, but you look at it from the other angle, which is probably how much cash you got. But and it's just such a thing. I can remember that no one would talk to me about money. Like, don't get me wrong, you have the guys who are talking to you about spending it. They'll talk to you about it all day. Your yellow equipment dealer will ring you up and he will be in your office like this with a piece of paper for you to sign.
yeah.
Your finance guy will run through everything and your accountant will also run through everything. But at the end of the day, not one person is talking about it from a business perspective who will sit down and says, yeah, if you're going from 1 million to 10 million, you need a million in the bank. And they go,
Yeah.
but I'm turning over $1 million right now, like for a year. And you go, no shit. And that's okay. Get it, put it in the bank, save it, get the depth, get the altitude, be able to, because when you're scaling and you're now working for new people, there's new risks. You've got new scope of works on, you've got new employees that you don't know who they are or what they do, or let's talk about the alignment that they might have. And all of these pieces end up only being able to be fixed with cash. Like if there's a hole in the boat, in business, the thing that plugs it is $100 bill,
Well, sometimes $1,000 bills are required. Sometimes.
Well, that's just the stack of hundreds that you have to put there.
Right.
But I think that's what I've learned, and I've been in some really hard cash flow positions. I've been in some really difficult lessons. I've been part of some difficult lessons, and you will be. It's just that if that lesson is out there, I was saying to a guy this morning, he's like, I picked up some great jobs, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go, just before you go and do that, have you discussed your tax with your accountant? And he said, no. And I said, and after you've discussed your tax with the accountant, I just want you to think, could you happily replace the motor in the truck that you're driving? And he said, no. And I said, well, then you're probably not in the position to do what you need to do anyway, because how many K's on the motor? He's like, oh, it's got like 700,000. And I'm like, and motors are rebuilt when? And not trying to place a dampener on scaling, because and not trying to say that sometimes you need to run that motor out a little bit, and that's okay too. However, if that's intentional, great. If it's not intentional, you might be in a bit of trouble and you might not even know it.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned about bringing on new customers and bringing on new people in your company is if you think about it in terms of variables, like if you're just running a small crew like you did in the beginning, like I did in the beginning, the variable that you're going to achieve from what you expect to achieve is probably fairly small. In other words, you're probably going to But now you bring in people with different skill sets, or maybe they're not trained upright, or they have different operators with them, and the variable all of a sudden gets much bigger. Now you introduce your capacity, that variability into more new customers that also are variable. And the risk involved in this is pretty extreme. I mean, it can be really extreme.
I can give you a great example of this.
I knew you would.
Well, this is
That's what you're here for, Jimmy.
Yeah. So I started out with let's say one crew, and I started out doing these medium density site cuts for new houses that are all stacked together. And I would go there, and with a 14-ton, I would do 800, in between 700 and 1,000 yards a day, every day. 800 cube is what I used to aim for. 4,000 cubic meters out the gate every single week. Rain, hail, shine. New jobs. If you had to start, a new job and set it all out, well, then that was done at 5:30 in the morning while the machine warmed up. If you didn't have the dirt ready, you'd stay there at night time digging under light, so that when the trucks rocked up in the morning, you would move 800. As we scaled, that number dropped to 200. And I can remember, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago, I can remember because we were pulling it apart. I'd given it to a manager, we were running around, the manager had given it to a foreman, the foreman was running the jobs, we have all of these procedures in place, but we're moving 200. Like, we're not making... I was 800 with nothing.
Yeah.
With a printer at home and a set of plans that when I got home I printed out, and I'd go to work the next day with a tape measure and a laser, and I'd move 800 cube while organising the trucks and digging the hole and spray painting the ground. Now we've got all of these things and we're moving 200. Why? Well, we had so many checks and balances now. So now all of a sudden it meant that the guy who used to organise the transport, or the load boy, which was me, would be like, at 5 o'clock, you be here and I'll help you load it. I'll drive to the next job. I'll help you unload it, and I'll scrape up some grass a little bit so that the trucks have something to do in the morning. Well, now it was like, hang on, we don't know if we're going to be finished at 5. We're going to book the transport for the first thing tomorrow morning, which means now we're not going to book the trucks to be there, which means that job now, instead of running, is going to be pushed in 2 days. We'll book the trucks the next day.
Right.
It wasn't that people weren't working. In fact, they were working really bloody hard. Yeah. It's just that there was a variable that they worked different than I did. And because I was in charge of that job from its conception to its end, I was able to maximise every single step along the way. And that's great, but that's not scalable. It's not scalable for me. I couldn't move any more dirt. I couldn't even move 900 a day. I was maxed at 800 a day. But overall, even at 200 average for a crew, we probably ended up moving 2,000 a day because we had more crews and more jobs and, more trucks, and we probably moved that 2,000 for less money. But if you just take a material move per day per machine, God, we went to shit. And that's actually really, how do you learn that? Where's that in a book?
So that's a really interesting question, because I'm thinking about this right now, and the way, so you've got a foreman on the job doing the job you were doing, correct? And other people involved.
Yeah.
But let's just take the foreman. And you were seeing opportunity everywhere. I mean, that's just the way your mind works. And I think that's an entrepreneurial mindset, is you see opportunity everywhere. And so the question is, let's say this guy, this foreman, was a bucket. And moving 800 cubes a day was the task you pour into that bucket. Okay? And if it leaks out the bottom of the bucket, then let's see, how's the right way to say this? If it leaks out the bottom, then this person probably isn't committed to the work. Okay, yeah. He's not committed to the work. If it leaks out the sides, then let's say he's not trained. So just think of it that way. Now we've got somebody. Now we're going to evaluate what the issues are. Is it because we haven't trained them?
It was out the top. It was completely and totally out the top. I had those jobs wound like a drum. You know, the expectation was far too much. It's too much expectation to expect a guy to get on site at 5 a.m. and leave at 8 p.m. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's unsustainable. The QS or the QA, whatever it was, you know, like let's say the as-built, they weren't getting done. However, I knew that the jobs were good because I did them. However, I told him that he had to do them. And so every step along the way slows and pulls down that ceiling of 800 down to 200. And then looking back, or you know, your brain, and you just go, I'm sure that you had a time when you were laying, you know, 100 lengths of pipe in a day, and then you left that job and you look at the week's thing and you go, you laid 100 pieces of pipe in a week. You know, I was laying that a day, you're in a week. What is going on? And then once you go through it, you really can't see that many gaps. You go, well, is the expectation too much? Or as the boss, was I skipping so many steps that other people are encumbered to do?
Yeah. So what you're describing to me is you basically introduced a lot of friction points for him.
Yeah, I did.
And maybe didn't recognize that up front. And now that you introduce those friction points and you recognize it, you can either work to kind of mitigate those friction points or drop your standards.
Well, we were this was probably now 10 years ago, I reckon, maybe even more than. I think I was mid-20s and I'm late 30s now, so like 15 years ago it was, and I probably hadn't looked at myself as being the boss, which is, I think, something else that isn't spoken about a lot, although the people who do speak about it are often probably not the highest qualified people to speak about it. But I hadn't looked at myself as the boss and thought, you know, how do I move 800 a day? You know, what's my expectation of these jobs? What am I quoting at? And I can remember I was quoting at like 400 or 500 a day, and I was making big money. Yeah. And then but why am I quoting at 400 or 500? Because that's more of an industry standard to be doing that, because of all of these, as you said, friction points that people have to take into account that I was not taking into account.
Yeah. And
that's where you grow as the leader and grow as the boss. And then now our standard is around that 300, 350. I know the numbers, but it's around the 350. But I want everything buttoned up. You know, we don't leave a job incorrect. We don't do a job wrong. We have all of our paperwork in place. We do not miss variations. We definitely do not miss safety. And if that means that job drops much below 350, then we're going to have some conversations. But most of all, they end up coming out at about that way. Yeah. You know, because by the time you take into account all of those things and to actually have the people with the water in the bucket be the correct amount, that's 350 over per machine is what we do it at on those ones. So
that's why you had the money to scale, because you did so well on your productions in the early days.
And one of the reasons, I had a lot.
It's a real thing. I think the other thing is that we tend to set our crews up. At least I've seen this a lot in our company and other companies. We equip our crews with the equipment that it needs to have the best day it can have. In other words, for the optimal day. And really, you're only going to have that optimal day maybe one day out of 8 or 10, right? And then there's going to be days that are not good for 2 or 3 days out of that 10, and then the rest are going to be average. And so when we set our crew up and optimize for, let's say we go to a 35-ton excavator versus a 20-ton excavator, and 2 more trucks because they've got a bigger hoe and a loader and a few more laborers, and then all we get is average days. when all we really should expect is average days. So I think in the industry, we have a tendency to set our crews up for the optimal day, when I think we ought to set it up for maybe just a little bit better than average. And then we wouldn't cost ourselves so much.
I also find that by the time you have scaled a little bit, and by the time you have a little bit more money, it's real easy to stack that thing with diggers or loaders or anything. More than what? You need a 500? No problem. You need a 350 instead of a 20? No. Got one on its way. I've got my own truck that will bring it to you right now. Thumbs up. And so we focus, and I know I've done this myself so much, we focus on the equipment rather than giving the tools to the guys on site to actually win the day.
Yeah, right. Because winning is important to us all, right?
Yeah, we want to win the day. Everyone wants to win. And that, like, one part of it is, I don't know what the percentage, but only one part of it is what that machine is on site. The other parts of it is what our goals were. You know, if there's an actual tangible outcome that you're doing, you know. I know for myself that in the last month we've spent quite a bit of time dewatering. Dewatering is a soul-destroying job, because what ends up happening is that when it rains again, because you're only dewatering because the time of the year that it is means that there's a lot of water from sky. Yeah. And because there's a lot of water from the sky, it means it's coming tomorrow. And now you've spent half of the day getting in a position where this job can actually move forward, to then come back the next day and it's back to where you were yesterday morning. And that's tough. And how do you get the motivation and how you get that? Like, it doesn't matter what size machine there or what size pump I've got. That crew is not feeling like they're doing great.
And you just said it. I can remember we were on a sewer job, and I was right after I flunked out of college, and they had me tending the well points on a sewer job we were putting across a marsh, and I had the night crew, and the superintendent told me, if that pump shuts down for 1 minute, we're going to lose 2 weeks of water control. Now, I think he was maybe being a little bit dramatic.
Yeah, that seems a bit unfair.
but he impressed on me that I wasn't going to sleep an ounce that night. And you're right, because you have to get up and do it again, when you're in one of those seasons, or if you're working in a river or stream, or high water table. It can be.
It's a grind, and I know for a fact that when you were doing that, you didn't feel a great amount of achievement going home to your wife, and she says, "How was your night shift?" And you go, "Well, the pumps didn't turn off."
Right.
And she goes,
"It was a huge win. The pumps didn't shut off."
Yeah, the pumps didn't shut off. Not for 1 minute, because the 60-year-old guy yelled at me and said that if they shut down for 1 minute, it's going to be my fault that everyone goes home for 2 weeks.
Yeah, for a week, yeah.
You said you had some questions for me today.
Yeah. One of the things you and I talked about a little bit, that I think is a really powerful thing to talk about maybe on this podcast, is what gave you the confidence to go into business on your own?
Challenging. I was working at a soap factory, packaging boxes.
Soap factory?
Yep.
Yeah.
Packaging boxes of soap. I'd worked there on and off for about 3 or 4 years, since my mid-teens. I'd gone from being soap box stacker to packer to running the machine, probably at a fairly early age, and everything else like that. And then I ended up having a bit of an argument at the. I've never gotten in an argument since though, but I ended up getting into a little bit of an argument at the soap factory, and I left. And it was really strange. My mum called me when I walked out the driveway, and my mum doesn't call me that much. She's one of those parents who can't run a mobile phone to save herself. But She called me before I got to my car. So you think I've quit inside the factory and I've grabbed my shit. Screw this place. I'm out of here. It didn't quite work like that, but it's better for the story if it did work like that.
I know what you mean, yeah.
However, the part of the story that is the truth is that before I started my car in that car park, my mum called me and said, "Good morning, James. I felt I needed to call you. How are you?" And I said, "I'm actually a bit upset. I reckon I'm about done at the soap factory." And she called my dad. My dad called one of his friends because I knew how to drive an excavator, and his friend called me up but before I'd even gotten home, said, "I need you to come help me." And then at the end of the week, he said, "I can't pay you unless you have your own business. I don't put on employees." So I did, specifically because I was broke and had no money and I was 19. And then within 2 weeks or 3 weeks after that, I bought a 2.7 tonne excavator. And then figured out that
You're
no one wanted...
19 years old?
Yep. And then I figured out no one wanted to employ a 19-year-old with his own excavator, no matter what I told them. I didn't start a business intentionally. I didn't have a big business plan. In fact, I didn't have a business plan for a long time. But I found that I just, I quite enjoyed business. I very much enjoyed the challenge of trying to get people to employ a 19-year-old with his own excavation company, let me tell you. I did like that. And then, it probably took off a little bit more. I turned over 50,000 in my first year with a machinery loan, which is less than $1,000 a week, so you're not doing real well. However, I did work every day. I worked every day. So whatever I was doing, I was working on something. But then from that, I ended up slowly but surely building up some clientele, and it probably took off. I think I was on like 250 or 300 by the time I was 21. 21, 22, and then I think I did $1 million by the time I was 24. But if you think about it, I've been in business 5 years ago. I've been flogging my services to anyone who would listen for 5 years. It's just that's inside a 24-year-old, rather than most people start their businesses in this game when they're 25 or 30. And then after 5 years, everyone goes good. But yeah, so that's how I started, which isn't a normal story.
Well, that's the great thing about construction. There's almost no normal stories.
No.
It's almost always, I started with a 2.7 ton excavator, right? Or this guy behind me. This guy behind me is my grandfather at 18 years old, and he became a main guide. And then on the other side, this is him in the middle. 50 years later, or almost 50 years later, as a heavy contractor. And he started with a 2-yard REO Speedwagon dump truck. And he had to actually fit a hydraulic hoist onto it. And so those stories are really, before that, the bed was balanced on the truck. The hinge point was balanced on the truck, and when he parked on the fill, he'd have to get up and lift the front of it to dump it. And if you got too much dirt on the front, he'd have to shovel it on the back.
I have a Polaris with a very similar dump that you flick the lever and push it up to run around the property on. So it's interesting, and it's a story that I don't get into that often. But mainly because a lot of people don't ask, like they just assume that it came different. Now, I had the ability to drive the machines from my dad because he had my machines in various fields my whole life. My grandfather and his brother had a very big company. They had about 300 people working for them in Melbourne, probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest in Victoria in They started about 1950 and closed up about 1980. So there is a lot of machinery there, a lot of legacy in the name Starbuck.
Yeah.
unfortunately, I had to start it from a 2.7 because it would have been easier to start with something a little bit different. But
Well, but it wouldn't be the same story. But one thing that intrigues me about that is you said a couple times, 5 years in, 5 years in. And here's one of the things that I've noticed about you is you build on experience. In other words, 5 years in, you had 5 years of experience. You didn't have 1 year of experience 5 times.
no,
And there's a big difference. There's a lot of people in this world that will do the same thing 5 years in a row, and they've got 1 year of experience 5 times, not 5 years
Correct.
of experience. And so I'm going to push a little more. Like, out of those experiences, are there any of those that you still call on? Like any of those lessons, experiences you
I
learned?
think I learned my fundamental lessons in that 5 years that you need to continue to place over your company. You must have integrity.
Yeah.
And that's just not a word on a wall. That is how you act. That is the person you are. That is how you treat your people, your customers, everything.
Yeah.
Now, that can come across in different ways, but at the end of the day, you must have integrity. I think that you also must, that comes out in doing what you say, saying what you do, delivering on a project, because at the end of the day, a lot of people forget, if you price a job to deliver it, now, if there are no legitimate variations, you have to finish that job,
Yeah.
even if you're losing money. And people
Especially if you're
forget,
losing money.
especially, correct. And people forget that, Herb. All of a sudden, they're like, nah, the job's going to shit, I'm out of here. And you go, what do you mean? I've never left a job in my life. And like you said, even when you're losing money, that's when you separate the boys from the men. Because, I've told you on this podcast that we had a job that lasted a year and we were burning money from about 6 months in. You just have to stay. Hard work. You cannot discount hard work.
That's correct.
Output is equal to input. If you are working 2 hours a day, then you're going to get 2 hours of output. Now, you might be really great and you might do a lot in those 2 hours, but you're not going to keep up with the guy who's really great doing 12 hours or 15. Hard work is super, super important. And then there's honesty and a few other, they come out like buzzwords. People throw them into a...
But they're there. I mean, it's just like the blood in your veins, right? They're there. And you say that you're right. You talk about integrity and honesty, and they're buzzwords that a lot of people have on their wall. But, that's kind of what I got on the wall behind me here. That's our values, and they're and the question is, if I printed these out and I handed them to my employees and customers, would they laugh at me? Or if you're an employee out there and you say, here are my values as an employee, and you showed them to your boss, would they laugh at you, or would they say, no, 100%, you're right on? And I just think it's some of those words you use, like integrity and honesty, aren't really up for debate, right? I mean, they're pretty hard. They're pretty hard lines, and I think most people can tell if you're dishonest or not of integrity.
I think so.
Pretty quickly.
I think that, however, business can sometimes reward those in a way in short term. Always in the short term. Going against those words can net people a lot of money, and every person who will listen to this knows a story of a contractor who has made a lot of money by being dishonest, by not having integrity, right? And made you look at him and you go, I have never made that much money that he made. That's bullshit. However, they never last. They never, ever last. It always comes back to bite them. The customers always end up going to the trusted people who they know will look after them, even if that does cost them money. Because we're not talking about money. We're talking about the trust of delivering a job or the whatever it might be. But they're not just words on a wall, and they never ever should be, or they shouldn't be thrown around. But I learned very early on, I used to rock up to places and say, I don't have the best equipment, but I will get this job done faster than anyone else. And they go, how? I'll say, I'll give you 50% discount if I don't. Then they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, I got no other work. I think that I can get it done. I can remember one was going to be 2 weeks and everyone was quoting a month, and they said, there is no way this can be done in 2 weeks. And I said, well, yeah, it can. I said, if it's not done in 2 weeks, pay me half. And they said, well, we can't lose at that. Like, you'll clearly be doing more than 50% of the work. And then I got it done in 2 weeks, and they came back and they said, well, the reason we got you was not because of the fact that you said pay me half. They said that was just the thing that, got us intrigued enough to do it. They said, we really ended up believing that you would be able to do it because of how you sold yourself, the way that you knew about the job, which then moves into the different levels of fundamentals of business, which is knowing what you do, knowing how to perform it, learning from things and learning from people, and then working hard. They said the reason that they got me was because of the fact that I had sold myself, that I was going to be able to give them a good outcome.
I remember I went to a job interview for the first job I ever got when I went on my own. I'd worked for my grandfather's business for 6-7 years. I think I was 27 at the time, and it was just me. I had a PC, that I was figuring bids on, and that was it. And I went to this interview. I'd given the guy a bid on a Walmart project of all things, and he said, "You're my apparent low bidder, but we got to talk. How much equipment do you have?" And I said, "Today I don't have any." And this is about a $3 million job. And he said, "How many employees do you have?" I said, "Today I don't have any, but I've got 15 people. I need 20. I've got 15 people." And he said, "You don't have any equipment. You don't have any people. Why would I hire you to do this job?" And I said, "Because you won't have to lay awake and worry about it, because that's going to be my job."
Yeah.
And he gave me the job. I don't know why.
That guy.
He was foolish. It was a very similar story to yours, but he didn't have to lay awake at night and worry about it, because that was my job.
I would have been blazing you if someone sat in my office right now. So it's really interesting, because I have a lot of people that come to us. I'm sure you'd have a lot of people come as well, looking for opportunity and stuff. And it's very, it is just so apparent, people who are after the opportunity, and so apparent that people who say that they're after the opportunity. And so another thing that we can talk about starting business is, are you looking to make a lot of money, or are you looking to start a business? Now, don't get me wrong, a business has to make money. However, it is so clear the people who are going into it to just try and to make big money. And very rarely do they end up making it.
Right.
Money can't be can be one of the drivers, but it can't be the only driver. You must have something, dragging you along to have a successful company, whether it's the company's success, my success, whatever it might be. Now, that might be measured with how much money you've got, but it's not the reason why you're doing it.
Right. For me, it was I wanted to be a builder, and I need to make a living.
Yeah.
That's why correct. I left and I want to make a living, and so there you have it. And I knew I wasn't going to get rich in day one. And there's a book, you've heard of Simon Sinek,
yes.
guy named Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called The Infinite Game, and he talks about what you just said a few minutes ago, is like every time you do a short-term fix, it has almost always long-term cost. You can win this project, but if you win this project, are you really winning? And I said earlier, we all want to win, and I mean that like on a daily basis. We want to go in and feel like we won something. But in terms of winning a job, to me, we feel like everybody involved in the job has to feel like they won. That's winning in a job for us. When everybody, the owner, if it's a traveling public, if it's our employees, the engineers, we feel like we want everyone to walk away going, yeah, that was a win for us. And if we can do that, think how much easier construction is.
Everything's a piece of piss then. If everyone's pulling in the same direction, then everything turns super easy.
And we're going to run into people, employees, owners, engineers, the public. We're going to run into people that wake up in the morning and try to figure out a way to make us go backwards first. We're going to run into those people.
100%.
That's kind of changing the rules around what winning looks like to me. Let's still figure out how we win in that condition.
Yeah, that's a different sort of win that you're chasing then.
Yeah.
So Louis given me the 5-minute warning, which means that we're over an hour, which is good.
Okay.
Because, we really ran out of things to talk about in this episode again.
2 questions and we chewed up an hour.
Yeah.
What are we going to do when we really get questions coming in?
I don't know. We'll have to. Maybe we'll set a timer in the background that says how long that we're able to talk on one question. 15 minutes max.
It'll be like a game show.
Well, did you have any thoughts to end it off with, or?
Well, no. I think this conversation for me, learning what got you in business, and then some of those principles that you still call on today, I think helps kind of answer that question of scale. Like, how do I scale? And it's maybe not so much in a spreadsheet that you scale, but in the principles you live by and the values you live by, and the idea that you don't win today, you win over the long haul. And trying to run your business that way. And hopefully that's an answer for the individual that asked it to you. Maybe he's going to wish you said
that's a banging little clip there. I like that.
Yeah. Maybe he's going to say, no, I want to be rich like next year. So this is the wrong answer for him. But
buy lottery tickets. Yeah.
In hope, right?
Yeah. Cross every finger and toe that you've got, or because construct. Yeah, sure. Construction might get you there, but it's not getting you there in 6 months.
No, but I do know. I really do like the idea that we've got questions coming in from people outside, and we want to encourage that, right? And down in the show notes, if you scroll down on whatever app you're using, you'll see an email address that you can send a question to, whether it's to Jimmy or to me or to both of us, however you want to address it. Let's do that.
Perfect. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, share, and tell your mates.
Yeah.
I've got that down pat now. Like, I'm killing it with that.
I've never done that part.
Yeah, that's all right. I've got that part covered now.
Okay.
Herb, till next week.
Really enjoyed it, Jimmy. Take care.
I'll speak to you soon.